Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 4 of the preseason between the San Jose Sharks and the Los Angeles Kings, in which the Sharks have lost 2-1 in overtime. And to immediately jump into the roster, obviously the usual shakeups that you expect from preseason, but we seem to be getting closer and closer to an actual starting lineup for the San Jose Sharks. Obviously, there are still some players here who are clearly not going to make the roster outside of the preseason, players like Sabourin and Todd, but primarily this lineup is consisted of players who you do expect to see come Game 1. And starting off with this first line of Barabanov, Hertl, and Duclair, it would be no surprise to anybody to see these three players line up together for that first game of the regular season. It definitely is seemingly in the cards for the San Jose Sharks. And so this was an opportunity to see a sort of brief preview of how that line may very well look, because obviously you have Barabanov and Hertl who have played together for a couple of years now, but Duclair is a complete newcomer to this team, and so it was waited to be see how exactly he would complement those other two players. And it was expected in a preseason game, even if they're not necessarily putting their best foot forward, that they'd be able to dominate the ice, and yet the complete opposite happened, where they didn't really do much of anything. Duclair had like a pseudo breakaway in the earlier parts of this game from a Tomas Hertl pass, which was decent to see for sure, and Duclair had some nice stick handling moments, while Hertl had some decent individual efforts in the offensive zone, primarily on the power play. But as a unit together, things didn't really go all that well for the first couple of periods, to the point where a substitution was made and Barabanov was dropped to the third line, and Eklund ended up getting a couple of shifts with Hertl and Duclair. So the early returns on this potential first line for the San Jose Sharks are not great. Now, it is the preseason, and we can't take these immediate sweeping sort of results from it, but if you're David Quinn watching these three players play together, you're probably not inspired a lot of confidence from it. Moving on to the second line, I was obviously very excited to see Bordeleau paired with William Eklund. Definitely a treat for us to be able to watch this happen. Now, how did it actually go? Well, in particular for Eklund, I thought this was a pretty good game. The thing that really impressed me the most about Eklund in this game is not so much his offensive play at even strength or even on the power play, but actually his defensive play on the penalty kill. So he has been used more and more. He actually got some shifts in this particular role at the end of last season during his short stint, and in this preseason he's been getting some penalty killing shifts, and he's been doing some very, very good things on it and making some right choices. This isn't just him, he's blocking a couple of shots and he's getting it down the ice, but he's making smart micro decisions of whether or not he should actually either send the puck down the ice if the correct play calls for that, or carry it out himself and waste more time, because just a simple dump in, of course, kills off maybe like a dozen seconds on the clock, but if you can carry it in and even better get a face-off in the offensive zone on the penalty kill, you can kill off double, maybe even triple that amount of time, depending on how well you defend after that. And so Eklund multiple times in this game managed to make the smart move each and every time, which definitely very much impressed me. That this isn't to try and downplay his offensive contributions in this game, which there were a decent amount of. He had some solid chances, really good stuff play near the end of the game, but his defensive play, which is something that you definitely want to see if you're David Quinn to really hammer home him being an NHL regular, was very encouraging. On the other hand, Thomas Bordeleau, the other half of this duo, who I have been pretty impressed with thus far through the preseason, through his first couple of games, had a bit of a down one here tonight. Not a great outing for Bordeleau, a lot of giveaways on some of his more ambitious passes. I felt as though he was even bailed out a couple of times by William Eklund. There was this one play in particular, I believe in the first period, where Bordeleau goes for this pass to try and clear the zone, ends up getting picked off near the blue line. Could have led to a great chance if Eklund wasn't immediately on that guy and it was able to then clear it out with his help. So definitely a bit of a struggling game for Bordeleau, who at the very least I thought was still pretty good on the power play, but even strength not so great, which is not a very good thing for his chances, which seem to be lower than William Eklund, expectedly, to be able to make the team. And these two players were joined on the second line by Luke Kunin, who I actually thought was a pretty solid choice to pair with these two players. That physical element that Kunin can bring does complement the other two players well, and I thought Kunin, in his first action since being injured in the middle part of last season and missed the entire rest of the year, I actually thought Cunnin looked pretty good considering those circumstances, and it was nice to see as he gears up for the start of the regular season, since he will almost certainly make the starting lineup. When it comes to the third line, I again appreciated Hoffman, now his second preseason game for the San Jose Sharks here, and he again ends up impressing me on the ice. His offensive play is quite solid, his power play performance is very, very good, and his defensive play, while obviously not facing very high competition and not exactly the best of efforts from the opposing teams, it is definitely better than I expected. And so Hoffman, a player who I really wasn't excited about when the Sharks picked him up in the Erik Karlsson trade, is someone who is impressing me more and more, which is not only good for the San Jose Sharks because of his performance on the ice, but also good because he is a potential trade target at the deadline, and if he does well this season, he might actually be movable with the 1 year remaining on his contract. He was centered by Nico Sturm here tonight, who also is playing in his second preseason game of the year. And in his first one, I thought there was some rust, not exactly a great performance. Here tonight, definitely a step up. Sturm was better for sure, and just generally had a pretty good game, not only on offense, but as well on defense, complemented on this third line quite well. When it comes to the other player here, that would be Justin Bailey, who gets another opportunity in this one after a very strong preseason opener game. Here tonight, took a step back, I would say, certainly not as noticeable. And like I mentioned earlier on, there were still a few players littering the lineup here tonight for the San Jose Sharks who are very unlikely, if not pretty much you could say impossible, to make the starting lineup for the San Jose Sharks. Bailey is very well going to be one of them, so not much else to say. And then when it comes to the fourth line for the San Jose Sharks, Sabourin, Kaspick, and Todd. Again, three players not expected to make much of an impact with the San Jose Sharks, not only for Game 1, but for the rest of the regular season. If there is one player who I do want to point out, it is Nathan Todd. He had a couple of preseason games already, which were really good, at least relative to what you might expect. Here tonight, not exactly as much of a shining star, so to speak. When it comes to the defensive side of things, we have the first pairing of Ferraro and Benning. Ferraro was someone who I've been quite hard on in the past, not only last season throughout the entire year where he was one of the Sharks' worst players in my opinion, but also in his first preseason game I did not think things went particularly well, but here tonight was definitely a moving forward moment for Ferraro, a bit of a return to form from what we saw not last year, not even the year before that, but maybe a couple of years before that. So I don't know if that really means much going into the rest of this season, but at least it was a good game for Ferraro, which was nice to see. His defensive pairing here tonight was Matt Benning. Benning, generally a relatively stable game as per usual, what you would expect. The one thing I do want to mention about Matt Benning is his power play performance has been not great. I mean, watching the Sharks get a 5-on-3, put Matt Benning on the ice, him to carry the puck right down the middle, get to the opposing team's blue line, and then fire a very weak shot onto Riddick, who is then able to take the time to clear the puck out of the zone himself, was probably one of the worst plays I have ever seen on a 5-on-3 power play. Just absolutely the incorrect choice. It was honestly kind of mind-boggling, so I do not want to see Matt Benning on the power play, which gives the Sharks even less options to actually work with going into next season. If Thrun is able to make the team out of preseason and training camp, he could be the number one guy for the San Jose Sharks, but he might end up playing over a player like Jacob McDonald, which means who would be the number 2 guy if not Matt Benning, because again, I don't really want to see him in that role. So that might be something the Sharks could tinker with a bit more over these last couple of preseason games. On the second pairing, we have Vlasic and of course Mukhamadullin. Now, judging by David Quinn's comments from a couple of days ago, it does seem as though Mukhamadullin is destined to be playing AHL time for this upcoming season. Isn't really a possible option for Game 1, it seems, just judging by those comments. So that's slightly disappointing, but also very understandable. Mukhamadullin, I feel as though, has been pretty good through this preseason, but I'm not exactly sure if he is NHL ready just yet. I think that AHL time will definitely do him some good. In particular for tonight's game, I actually thought Mukhamadullin was rather solid, not anything amazing, and we're still not really seeing that good offensive upside that he was advertised as having, but getting getting that stability to his game is still important and was definitely there tonight. And then his defensive pairing partner was Marc-Edouard Vlasic. Honestly, not that much to say here about Vlasic. He continues to not exactly be the best player, but still likely a lock to make the roster outside of training camp. And then when it comes to the final pairing on the night, we had Knyzhov and Jan Ruda. Ruda, a bit of a slow start to this game, but seemed to pick things up as it went on. However, unfortunately for the San Jose Sharks, another defenseman going down with injury. We saw Shemek in last game. Tonight it is Jan Ruda. I don't exactly know how severe it is. It didn't really seem that severe considering he was able to skate off the ice under his own power, but obviously still not a very good thing for the San Jose Sharks. He was picked up in that Erik Karlsson trade and is a very importantly a right-handed defenseman, something that the Sharks are lacking, though recently with a waiver wire pickup they have somewhat shorn up that part of their team. But if Ruda is out long-term, the Sharks will have a pretty clear hole on the right side of their defensive lineup. And he was indeed paired with Nikolai Knyzhov, who in his first preseason game I wasn't super impressed with. I thought he was decent, but not nearly as good as he needed to be to actually be able to make the team. Here tonight, I definitely thought he was better and more apparent. He actually ended up getting a shift in the overtime for the San Jose Sharks, which was surprising to see, but was perhaps a testament to how solid he had been in the regulation time of this game, and so David Quinn rewarding him with some 3-on-3 play. So I definitely liked how Knyzhov did, and with all these Sharks injuries, he has higher and higher chances of actually being able to make the team. And then when it comes to the goaltender here tonight, we had Magnus Krona. Now, during the rookie face-off tournament, the Sharks played 3 different goaltenders, and I thought Krona was the best of the 3 of them. And now in preseason, the Sharks have played 4 different goaltenders, including the tandem that they are expected to head into next season with, that being Mackenzie Blackwood and Kaapo Kähkönen. And yet Krona's performance here tonight was perhaps the most impressive out of any of the goaltending performances through the preseason. Now, that might not be saying all that much. Blackwood was not particularly good in his game. Rovanov was quite bad in his. And while Kaapo Kähkönen was pretty decent in his, it still wasn't all that great. Krona is the loser here tonight, 2-1 in overtime, but just 2 goals, really didn't get much goaltending, much goal support for himself. The first goal, he didn't really have much of a chance on. The second one, he technically could have wanted that back, but it's still on a bit of a tough situation, 4-on-3 power play, so I'm not going to fault him too much there, especially since he had been sliding around a lot on this power play. Multiple times they looked for that one-timer, and he had already made a couple of nice saves on the very same goal scorer player who ended up winning that game for the Kings. So generally been very impressed with Krona with this preseason game and that rookie face-off tournament game, and so he may end up being a good goaltending prospect for the San Jose Sharks over these next couple of years. Again, I do not expect to see him actually in this upcoming season. It's very likely just going to be a Kähkönen-Blackwood duo, as bad or as good as that may end up being. But Krona, in a couple of years, could he be a starter for the San Jose Sharks? Perhaps. He seems to have a very calm demeanor, and I like the confidence as well that he showcased in this game. The early parts where he was making those simple glove saves, but still the little windmill that he would do shows a goaltender who is confident in themselves, and that was nice to see. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday as we get closer and closer to that regular season start. Just 2 more preseason games on the docket for the San Jose Sharks, and then a week's time before Game 1. Class dismissed.